Welcome to Washington. My name is Sunil Iyengar. I'm the Director of Research and Analysis at the National Endowment for the Arts. This is the second half of a double-decker session. We just hosted the first half. I have the privilege to co-host it with my colleague Bill O'Brien, who just led the first session from the National Endowment for the Arts. Bill and I are lucky that the American Psychological Association chose to come to DC this year, and we're also lucky that APA's president, Nadine Kazalo, is herself a dancer and also very interested in research involving the arts and creativity. And so when she invited us to do this double session on psychological research around the arts, Bill and I were delighted. And we also thought, as good public servants, that we should probably do something to ensure that a maximum number of people who couldn't fit in this room could access these results, or could view this later. So we are essentially videotaping this, and it will be archived for future use. I wanted to just therefore read a statement. The event is being video recorded. The recording will be available for viewing at www.arts.gov after the conference. By attending this event, your voice and likeness may appear on the archived video shown at arts.gov. Those are practical matter. I think mostly our likenesses will be shown. You will, however, your voice may in fact carry. Okay, so I think one of the uniting factors of this presentation, the one that just preceded it, is both Bill and I thought in our own way we would bring some speakers together to talk about some really exciting work done on arts as intervention. The previous session, for those of you who attended, was largely about arts in clinical settings to treat psychological trauma, other conditions, related conditions. And in this case, we are also looking at a couple of examples of arts interventions. And I'm really pleased to say a couple of them are NEA, are at organizations that have gotten recent NEA research grants. And so you'll be seeing some of their work relative to, in one case, drawing interventions, and also in another case, arts enrichment in preschool settings. Slightly different populations we're talking about, but I think the theme is still constant. Again, bringing intellectual clarity to emotional chaos, as Bill explained, is a tag from Aristotle. Okay, so before we go forward, I'm just going to quickly just kind of give you some sense of why the National Endowment for the Arts is in this space, what we're interested in with the research we do and support. And it really, for those of you who don't know, the National Endowment for the Arts is a independent federal agency, which largely is a grant-making entity, awarding grants to support arts creation as well as engagement in the arts, which is inclusive of arts education and supporting livability of communities through artworks. And also, we do have, some people don't know, a research function. And we actually came up with a strategic plan for research at the agency a few years back, and it's helped to guide us since, a 5-year research agenda with the strategic goal of promoting public knowledge and understanding about the contributions of the arts, particularly looking at concepts of value and impact. What are some hypotheses around value of the arts and impact on individuals and communities? We won't go into great detail here, but this is just to show you that we did try to put some thought into it, and it came up with, actually through several iterations and a community consultation process that involved working with researchers, practitioners inside and outside the arts from various disciplines and fields, a system map, which helps us to organize, and I know you probably can't read it all back there, but if you go to arts.gov and look up how art works, it shows you where we perceive some of the promising areas of study and what are the potential relationships therein. So just for our purposes, we're really focused on what would be, I guess, southeast, the far right, I guess, 5 o'clock part of this, where there's a little box that says benefit of art to individuals, inclusive of cognitive and emotional benefits. That's not to say those are the only kinds of benefits or the only construct, but those are two domains that for which we've seen a lot of research, some done by, I'm sure, some of the people in this room that have helped to contribute to the literature. So one of the vehicles we use for promoting knowledge here and for building it is an interagency task force that was developed a few years ago, where really from the head of the Department of Health and Human Services and the head of the National Endowment for the Arts getting together and deciding to build a coalition in the federal government around really building the evidence base around arts and its intersection with both health and, actually, as it turns out, education. We've released about 3 publications so far, again on our website. And the concept of the arts in human development is manifold here. There's a lot here to cover, but I'll just quickly say that, for the purposes of understanding this task force, and what it's tended to focus on, it's really 3 stages of human development. Early childhood, and within that, as we'll see, there's some great literature around the arts' role in relationship to school readiness. Teenagers and young adults, looking particularly at the arts and academic and social achievements. And older adults, the arts' relationship to cognitive and motor ability and quality of life. Those aren't to say those are the only existing plausible relationships, but those are some around which a lot of literature we believe is cohered and warrant perhaps larger scale studies. And the concept of human development really goes back a long ways, of course. We don't have scope for it here to discuss that here, but essentially what we were noticing at the federal level was different departments, agencies, and now I should say there are about almost 20 different federal entities that are part of this task force. We've seen this concept of the whole person, the idea that devising interventions to treat people where they are, in their communities, or when we talk about education, it's often termed as formal or informal learning environments. Health and well-being, this resonates with the quote that Bill gave in the last session, meeting patients, really focusing on patient-centered care. If you will, a more holistic approach to interventions and recognizing that people's different stages of life may have something to do with the way they respond to therapies or interventions. So we had our first meeting in 2011. Our mission is to catalyze new research opportunities, partnerships, and information sharing to advance public knowledge about the arts' role in human development. We've done many things so far. We meet quarterly. We host public webinar series, which I encourage you to take a look at through our website. We've convened a National Academy of Sciences workshop with our partners at the National Institutes of Health. We've commissioned papers. We've produced some modules. Members, particularly the NEA research team, has produced modules for the National Children's Study Vanguard phase, as well as the health and retirement study, looking at 2 opposite ends, if you will, of the lifespan and how the arts may be understood to relate to variables having to do with health and well-being in those modules. And finally, we actually just recently heard that the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, as a result of its engagement with the task force, has released a brand new funding opportunity, a program announcement around looking at arts-based approaches in palliative care, particularly symptom management. So just a bunch of members. You can see several NIH entities and various institutes and offices and divisions that are part of this task force. Again, a plug for a webinar series covering various topics related to the arts and health and education. We also try to spotlight grant opportunities. I would say the webinars are biased toward research. They tend to focus on opportunities for researchers to connect with other researchers, as well as findings they may want to know about, both in standard experimental research, but also through evidence-based practice that has risen to the surface. And speaking of research opportunities, I just told you about NIH grant opportunities. Well, NEA, we have a grant opportunity application guidelines that have just come out, I believe yesterday. I see Melissa Menzer, the head of our coordinator of our grants program, who's here in the room. And I'm sure she'd be glad to tell you more about it. September 3rd, there will be an informational webinar on the NEA website to tell you more about how to get involved and what the application deadline is, what the application parameters are like. And there's a deadline of October 21st. Essentially, they're fairly small grants, but this is the 3rd year of the program. We're very proud of the results, so much so that we've actually posted final reports of those grants on our website, the ones that have actually closed. And they're really worth the read. That's actually a condition of the grant. We asked for a paper presenting the results and methodology, et cetera. So we're going to fund probably about up to 20 grants this year, up to about 30,000 each. So to look at the arts value and impact. So I'm going to turn it over, but before I do, I just want to briefly, the lineup here is, I'm going to turn it over to someone I was really glad to who agreed to participate in this. And she's warned me that she doesn't like long introductions, so I'll have to skip some of what I was going to say. But Ellen Winter is a professor and chair of the Department of Psychology at Boston College, and she's also senior research associate with Harvard's Project Zero, many of you know. She's really a recipient of several, grants, but I'm particularly interested in, some of her grants from the National Science Foundation have looked at things like visual arts learning in relation to geometric reasoning, looking at musical instrument playing, or rather instrumental music in children and how it relates to cognition. Also looking at things like acting related to acting training and how it relates to sort of theory of mind, empathy, and emotional regulation. But she's done a lot of work, and Ellen, I just want to say that I think of Ellen a lot of times as a voice of good conscience in this field. She's very, I think she gives the unvarnished truth, which we need in this field of research, in any field of research really. But I think it's helped to raise the bar in many respects in our understanding of the rigor that's involved, particularly around studies of transfer. And so some of the work she's done, for example, with Lois Hetland, looking at really reviewing the field of arts education research and pointing out areas for improvement, as well as raising things to the surface that demand more attention, I think are truly beneficial to all of us. So I'm going to turn it over to Ellen, and then she will introduce Jennifer Drake, her former student, and then we'll hear from Eleanor Brown. Both of them, again, are working on NEA research grants, so we look forward to the outcomes of those. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunil. I'm going to talk for my 10 minutes about arts as an intervention for cognition, which gets us to the question of transfer. Can the arts be used as a way to study transfer of learning from one domain to another? There is, in the United States, I believe, an obsession with transfer when we talk about arts education. I'm sure you've all heard the claim that if you infuse the arts into schools, test scores will go up. I'm sure you've all heard the claim that the more arts you take in high school, the higher your SAT scores will be. I think this is a peculiarly American obsession, though I've been told by my European informants that it's seeping into Europe as well. Very dark here. My colleague Lois Hetland and I were interested in reviewing the evidence about arts transfer. We decided we would look at all of the studies that purported to claim that learning in an art form or learning in multiple art forms resulted in some non-arts cognition elevation. We were going to review all those studies, and we decided to do meta-analytic studies rather than narrative review of literatures. And we ended up doing 10 meta-analytic studies. And I'm going to tell you about the most controversial one. The really controversial one was the one that looked at arts integration, arts infusion, or just taking a lot of different forms of arts courses in school, where we didn't look at differences across art forms, but just kids were getting lots of different arts. And the outcome measured was either test scores or grades in school. We divided these studies up into two groups, correlational and experimental. The correlational studies gave us a very clear result. The more arts kids were involved in, the stronger their performance in school. When we looked at the experimental studies, where we had random assignment, pre-test, post-test, and arts intervention versus either no intervention or some other kind of intervention that was almost always no intervention, we also found very clear results. Absolutely nothing. There was no causal evidence when we put all of them together that putting the arts into schools raised test scores. And I concluded that there was no reason to expect transfer, because why should the arts improve verbal and mathematical performance, which is what test scores measure, and primarily what grades in school measure? And I argued that the arts should not be justified in this utilitarian way anyway, and we should start thinking about the abilities that the arts actually teach. This research got me in a lot of hot water. People were extremely angry, not artists. Artists actually said, thank God you're saying this. And art educators said that too, but art advocates didn't like it. And I got a phone call from a foundation which was funding research in the arts because they wanted to promote arts education. And this person told me that I was single-handedly going to ruin quality arts education for the children in this country because of my research. And I was a bit shaken up, but I said, I'm trying to change the conversation away from the arts as a handmaiden for test scores and get people to think about what the arts do that only the arts can do. And he said, it doesn't matter if you change the conversation. The only thing that's going to work to get arts in our schools is to tell the test score story, and that's what you're undermining. I also met a historian from Princeton who said to me, you should never have done this research. And if you did, given that you did do it, with the results that you got, you should have buried them and not published them. I really didn't think that I was doing that controversial research, and there are some areas of research I wouldn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole, but not this. So I persisted, and Lois and I persisted, and we said, well, let's do something positive now that we gave this negative story. Let's study what the arts really teach. Let's look at the habits of mind taught by the arts, try to focus on them, try to develop measures of learning of those habits of mind, and then let's look at whether those spill over. Because most of the research on transfer was done really poorly. It was kids studied the arts, did their test scores increase, with no theory about why. And if people think about it enough, it's very hard to, you'll come up empty-handed. It's hard to come up with a good theory of why. And by the way, you've probably heard about the new arts turnaround schools. It's an initiative of the President's Commission on Arts and Humanities, and they are also infusing the arts into schools, and their benchmark is, again, test scores. And I've read the website for the turnaround schools, and it says test scores are improving. But again, there's no explanation of why. One possibility is that arts directly transfer to improve test scores because of changing cognition. But another much more likely explanation, if they really are improving test scores, is increased motivation. Kids are more motivated, they like school more, teachers are more excited, and that's a mediated hypothesis, and it's a very, very different hypothesis, and I think those two have to be distinguished. So I just wanted to tell you briefly about the strategy that Lois Hetland and I took after we got so roundly criticized for this study. We spent 2 years hanging out in high-quality visual arts classrooms at the Boston Arts Academy and the Walnut Hill School for the Arts outside of Boston, trying to document the habits of mind that we saw being taught in high-quality arts classes, visual arts classes. And we documented 8 different habits of mind that we thought were being taught. We didn't measure learning, we just measured teaching. I'll just mention 3 of them. One is observe, learning to see, learning to look closely. One is envision, learning to generate mental images and manipulate them. And another is evaluate, which is part of reflection, learning to evaluate and decide what's good and what's not and why. So the next step in our research was to say, well, let's pick one of these habits of mind. Let's see if we can develop a measure of learning in that habit of mind, and then let's think of a domain where that habit of mind is used and see if learning in that habit of mind spills over into the other domain, which we thought would be a more motivated kind of transfer research. So we looked at envision, the ability to generate mental images and manipulate them. And we said, well, we're going to look at whether envision is actually learned in art classes and whether it spills over into a domain that we think also involves envisioning, which is geometry. Bottom line, we developed a measure of envisioning in art. We worked with artists to develop it, where people had to go beyond the information given in their drawing and actually draw things that they couldn't directly see. For example, drawing a human figure, reducing it to geometric shapes, form of abstraction, or drawing a model from the front and then drawing it from the back without looking at it from the back, imagining how it would look from the back. And we followed kids for 2 years, and we gave them pre-tests in art envisioning and in geometric reasoning. And by the way, the geometry didn't involve knowing any formulas. It was really spatial reasoning. And then we tested them at the end of 1 year and at the end of 2 years. I just want to tell you how difficult it is to find transfer, even when you're looking for this kind of near transfer. We found an overlap of skills. People who are good at envisioning in art are good at envisioning in geometry. But we actually did not find any gains in learning in our art envisioning measure over time. And we had wanted to be able to say, gains in art envisioning predict gains in geometric envisioning. We couldn't test that because we didn't find gains in art envisioning. All we found was this overlap in skills. The people who made terrible drawings were also terrible at geometry. Now we've redone the study with a higher age group. We're looking at Olin College of Engineering, Massachusetts College of Art, and Boston College as a non-spatial control group. And we found the same overlap, but we also did find now gains in art envisioning. So we tested the causal hypothesis that gains in art envisioning would predict gains in geometric envisioning. And again, we could not show it. So the point I'm trying to make is there may not be transfer, even you call these skills the same thing, art envisioning, geometric envisioning. The same people are good at one or good at the other, and yet there may not be causation. It may not be the case that if you train people in one, they get better in the other. It's extremely hard to show. Okay. We're going to now turn to using the arts as an intervention not for cognition, but for emotion regulation. And we're going to turn it over to Jen Drake, who has found in her research that the claim that we often hear that using the arts as a way to express one's pain is actually beneficial emotionally, that may not always be true, and sometimes the arts may be a form of emotional intervention because of something else, which I'm going to let Jen explain. Jen.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Sunil, for having me. I'm delighted to be here. So as Ellen mentioned, my research looks at the emotion regulation benefits of drawing. And what I'm interested in is how drawing can be used to improve mood outside of an art therapy setting. So how can it be used to improve mood in non-clinical samples of adults and children? And artists often talk about art as a form of therapy. The painter Cezanne said, "Paint, there lies salvation." And the writer Graham Greene said, "Writing is a form of therapy. Sometimes I wonder how those who do not write, compose, or paint can manage to escape the madness, the melancholia, the panic fear which is inherent in the human situation." And artists have talked about art both as a way to express and as a way to distract. And I wanted to investigate how drawing improves mood. Does it improve mood because it allows us to express our negative feelings? Or does it improve mood because it allows us to escape from those negative feelings? So here's a quote from Picasso. "So painting is just another way of keeping a diary." So here he seems to suggest that drawing is a way to, or art is a way to reflect and ruminate about issues that concern us. And I'll refer to this as the art to express view. Here's a very different perspective. So Renoir said, "For me, painting is a way to forget life." So here he's suggesting that art is a way to take us away from what pains us rather than immersing us in what pains us. A similar statement was made by Van Gogh. So when discussing the act of painting, "It distracts me infinitely better than anything else." And while there are many emotion regulation strategies, two seem particularly relevant to drawing. So distraction, turning away from our negative feelings, and venting, expressing those negative feelings. And these are the two strategies that I focused on in my research. So just to give you a roadmap of my talk, and I'm just giving you a snapshot of my research. So first, I wanted to investigate how does drawing improve mood? By what mechanism? Does drawing improve mood because it allows us to express negative feelings, or does it improve mood because it allows us to distract from those negative feelings? I also wanted to investigate, is there something special about drawing that improves mood more than other non-drawing distraction tasks? And then finally, whether this can be found in children, and if so, by what mechanism? Okay, so here's just a layout of the design of the study. So we first have some type of sad mood induction. In some studies, participants watch a sad film clip. So this is a clip from the Laramie Project where a father is speaking at the sentencing of his son's murderer. It's very emotionally charged, it's very upsetting. And in other studies, we make it a little more personal, and we ask participants to think of the saddest event they've ever experienced, and they have to relive that. After the mood induction, they're randomly assigned to either use drawing as a form of distraction or as a form of expression. And we measure mood before and after the mood induction, just to make sure that the mood induction did indeed make people feel sad or in a negative mood. And then we also measure mood after the drawing task. So this allows us to look at, does it improve mood, and if so, how? So I'm not going to get into the measure for purposes of time, but we use the positive affect and negative affect schedule. So this is a self-report measure. And our main outcome is mood improvement. So we're calculating a change score. We take affect after drawing and subtract affect before drawing. So this allows us to look at how much did the drawing improve mood. Okay, so first, working with undergraduates at Boston College, we investigated the mechanism. Is drawing improving mood via distraction or expressing? So for the activity, they're asked to, so it's a small intervention, it's about 10 minutes. In the express condition, they're asked to draw something about the film clip they watched. And in the distract condition, we instructed them to draw a house. The house was something neutral that was unrelated to the film clip. And hopefully you can see this in the back, but here are two examples. So in the express condition here, this is someone who drew the father. This is not working, but he's crying, he has tears, so he's clearly upset. And in the distract condition, we have someone who drew a house. So again, something neutral that was unrelated to the content of the film. Okay, so first looking at positive affect increase. So I don't know if that's, can you see this? But along the x-axis, we have condition, and along the y-axis, we have how much affect changed. So this is looking at mood improvement. For positive affect, we find no difference between the two conditions. So they improved positive affect equally. For negative affect decrease, so for this, again, if we're looking at the amount of affect that decreased with the higher bar indicating a greater decrease. So the higher the bar, the better, basically. And we find for negative affect that distraction decreases negative affect more than expressing. In our second study, we made two changes. So first, we changed the nature of the mood induction. We made it personal and potentially more powerful. So we asked participants to think of the saddest event they've ever experienced, and they had to re-experience that. And we also included in this condition a sit condition, or in this study a sit condition, which allowed us to control for passage of time. So in the express condition, they're asked to draw the sad event they recalled. The distract condition, they drew a house. And then the sit condition, they were asked to sit quietly. So this was intended, the sit condition, as a control condition. So with time, affect will dampen. So it could be that with the distraction condition, mood was improving just with time kind of going on. So the sit condition allowed us to control for time, but not having participants engage in an activity. So if mood improved just in the distraction condition, we could argue it's not due to time, it's just due to engaging in this pleasurable activity. So for positive affect increase, we found that the distract condition had a greater increase in positive affect than both the express and the sit conditions. And the express and the sit, basically they're almost at zero. So basically there's no improvement after either sitting for 10 minutes or for expressive drawing for 10 minutes. For negative affect decrease, we find that the distract condition had a greater decrease than the express. We found that the sit condition had a greater decrease than the express. Now there's a marginal difference between distract and the red bar and sit, the blue bar, with the distract having a slightly greater decrease than express. I'm sorry, than sit. So based on this study, we can conclude that drawing to distract improves mood more than drawing to express. It seems that temporarily shifting your attention away from the negative content improves mood more than expressing negative feelings. It's not due to passage of time. So we found that for positive affect increase, that the distract condition resulted in greater increase in the sit condition. However, negative affect did decrease equally in the distract and the sit condition. So why is there this difference? Unlike the express conditions, in the distract and the sit condition, they're not focusing on that negative memory, and this resulted in a decrease in negative affect. But for positive affect, in the distract condition, they are engaging in activity. Presumably this is pleasurable and would result in increases in positive affect. In our next series of studies, we wanted to look, okay, it's improving, drawing is improving mood via distraction. How about other non-drawing distraction tasks? Does it improve mood even more so, or is it equal? And the first activity we compared drawing to was writing. And we know a lot about expressive writing and writing paradigms from the work of James Pennebaker. He's shown that writing leads to short-term increases in negative mood, but then to long-term decreases. So based on that, we hypothesized that drawing would improve mood more than writing, at least in the short term. So again, working with undergraduates at Boston College, they were instructed to either use 10 minutes, they were randomly assigned to use 10 minutes to either write or draw. We also asked participants a self-report strategy after the completion of the study. So which of the following functions the task serve for you? It helped me to vent my feelings, or it helped me to think about other things other than the movie clip. And then we use these responses to classify participants as either using the activity to express or distract. In this study, we just measured positive valence. So we're looking here again, how much did positive valence increase for these two activities? And we find that in the short term, that drawing does increase positive valence more than writing. And for drawing, it's almost twice as much the increase than writing. And then we also looked at this self-report strategy. So for writing, those that reported either using expressing the activity to express or distract, we found no difference in how much positive valence increased, depending on which strategy they were using. For drawing, we found a marginal difference. So those that used drawing as a form of distraction had a greater increase in positive valence than those that used it as a form of expressing. It is almost significant, although the effect size is quite large. So there does seem to be an effect here. So based on this study, we conclude that drawing does improve mood more than writing, at least in the short term. And drawing seems to be most effective when used as a form of distraction. So when we turn away from negative feelings rather than focusing on those negative feelings. And it may be that in this case, for drawing, expressing is less effective because it is like rumination and it can lead to depression. We've also investigated this in children, and for purposes of time, I can't go into too many of the details, but I'm happy to answer any questions later. Working with 6 to 12-year-olds, we found a similar effect. Drawing does improve mood more than non-drawing distraction tasks for kids, and it works via distraction rather than expressing. So drawing to distract improves mood more than drawing to express. So again, when we're turning away from our negative feelings and shifting away from that negative content of a film or a sad personal memory, we find that drawing does improve mood more than non-drawing distraction tasks. We've compared it to writing. We've also compared it to games like Sudoku, so looking at things that are very distracting. And we find that drawing, again, improves mood more than non-drawing distraction tasks. This effect is also found in children, so it seems to be drawing does improve mood more, and it's working via that same mechanism of distraction. So the results so far of my research support the views articulated by Renoir and Van Gogh. So when art is used as a form of distraction, when we turn away from our negative feelings rather than immersing in our negative feelings, it improves mood. I think that distraction should not be thought of as kind of this mindless form of escape, but rather as an adaptive way of coping. So there are many people that have helped with this research, and I've listed them here. Thank you.
going to say that as the previous, you saw from Jennifer's worksheet, tantalizingly left off where you've done a study on children with young children, children, and this next one is going to be, the next presentation is going to be, I think, about exclusively early childhood related outcomes in the arts. Yeah.
Great. I want to thank you, Sunil, for inviting me here, and also thanks to Nadine Caslow. It was great to hear from Ellen and Jed, and I'm really pleased to have the chance to share some of my research findings. So I'll be talking about the art of emotion regulation for children facing economic hardship. My collaborators are Mallory Garnett, Kate Anderson, and Jean-Philippe Laurenceau. And also, I've collaborated with Settlement Music School and other Philadelphia Head Start programs, with many Westchester University research assistants. The work was made possible in part by a Westchester University College of Arts and Sciences Support and Development Award, and the most recent, perhaps most exciting phase of the research is made possible through the National Endowment for the Arts Research Artworks Grants Program. So we know that economic hardship signifies risk for problematic childhood outcomes, and that risk has to do with income impoverishment as well as correlated stressors. Children growing up poor are more likely than their middle-income counterparts to face residential moves, relationship transitions, neighborhood violence, family problems, etc. Such factors, particularly in combination with one another, undermine opportunities for healthy development. And the effects begin early and tend to accumulate over the course of the school years, absent intervention. Head Start is a national model for equalizing opportunities, and it has had very good results, yet economically disadvantaged children face opportunity gaps early on and resultant gaps in pre-academic achievement and social emotional readiness to learn that can be seen at Head Start entry and to some extent at Head Start exit, which means that as scientists and practitioners, I think we need to continue to explore how we can advance opportunities and outcomes for these children. The arts hold interest. First, because children are naturally interested in the arts. Also, because of varied channels. We learn best when the entire body is engaged and events are registered by several senses. And multiple modes for learning may particularly benefit English language learners and children with developmental delays related to poverty. Third, because of cultural relevance. The arts occupy a central position in the cultural traditions of most racial and ethnic minority groups, and including the arts may facilitate bringing varied cultural traditions into the classroom, as well as allow children to express their individual realities, thereby bridging the gap that often separates home from school for children from low-income and racial ethnic minority backgrounds. For the past 8 years, I've had the wonderful opportunity to work with Settlement Music School's Kaleidoscope Preschool Arts Enrichment Program, which is a Head Start site where children have music, dance, and visual arts classes as part of their daily schedule of activities. This is the only program I know of nationally or internationally that uses a fully arts-integrated model to serve economically disadvantaged children. And what that means is the arts are used not only to advance artistic skills, but also to foster skill development in core early learning domains: science, mathematics, language, literacy, social and cultural learning. Content and themes are linked and repeated across the arts and early learning classes. So for example, if children are learning about autumn, they might sing a song about falling leaves in music, pretend to be the wind blowing the leaves off the trees and dance, and paint fallen leaves in their visual arts class. If they're learning about patterns, they might play a drum to the beat in music, move their bodies to the beat in dance, and repeat a subject with variation in visual arts. And these Rangoli patterns, which are placed on the doorstep during Diwali, the Hindi festival of lights, provide one example of how the arts facilitate bringing varied cultural traditions into the classroom. So in an initial study in 2010, my colleagues and I examined growth in school readiness. In part one, we looked within Kaleidoscope and used their curriculum-based checklists, and we were very pleased to find no evidence of the achievement gap often seen even for children at other Head Starts. We also saw evidence of a possible advantage for children with developmental delays. In part two, we looked between Kaleidoscope and a comparison site that was matched on a number of variables but was not arts integrated. We used the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test, which is a widely recognized predictor of school success, And we found an advantage for the arts-enriched program. In fact, children at the arts program showed 3 times the gains in receptive vocabulary over the course of the year, which was a remarkable finding. And that led us to wonder if that advantage associated with the arts might be particularly relevant for children's social-emotional readiness to learn. We thought the arts classes might help children to experience positive emotions like interest, happiness, and pride. And we also thought the arts might foster emotion regulation by advancing children's development of emotion regulation skills or strategies for managing emotions, and possibly by helping them to express negative emotions. But we thought there might be benefits there, and we examined that in a study published in 2013 by Early Childhood Research Quarterly. My colleague Casey Sachs and I examined emotions first within Kaleidoscope. We used a well-validated measure developed by Carol Lazard called AFEX to observe children's emotion expression, and found that indeed children were showing more interest, happiness, and pride in their arts classes compared to traditional homeroom or early learning classes. In the second part of the study, we compared children at Kaleidoscope's arts-enriched program to those attending a matched comparison site that was not arts integrated. We continued to look at emotion expression, and we also looked at emotion regulation, teacher ratings on the emotion regulation checklist by Cicchetti and Shields. We found that children at Kaleidoscope's arts-enriched program did show greater interest, happiness, and pride than their peers attending the comparison site that was not fully arts integrated. We also found that children at the arts preschool improved over the course of the year in their positive emotion regulation skills, their strategies for managing emotions, and children at the comparison site did not show improvement on that dimension. Children at both preschools showed improvement in terms of negative emotion regulation problems, but the improvement was 5 times greater at the arts-enriched preschool. So those were striking findings that led us to wonder whether we might be able to document the impact of this arts programming at a physiological level. And that led us to our current project with the NEA, where we've asked, can the arts get under the skin? It was about a dozen years ago that Sonia Lupian and colleagues asked, can poverty get under the skin? And the answer was a resounding yes. Poverty influences physiological systems that respond to stress as indexed by the hormone cortisol, with a host of negative problems for cognition, emotion, and physical health functioning. There is some hopeful evidence that that impact can be alleviated, particularly with effective intervention in the early years. And we don't know of previous studies that have examined the impact of arts programming with children facing economic hardship, but studies with heterogeneous income samples of adults suggest that music, dance, some other arts programming can influence cortisol levels. So based on our observational work, we thought that might be the case for children as well. In the current study, we're looking at 400 children and 24,000 cortisol samples. Part 1, within this arts-enriched preschool Kaleidoscope, we're looking at questions like, can a single arts class change cortisol? And does more arts relate to more cortisol change? We're looking at those questions using a within-subjects experimental design. And we're using a quasi-experimental design where children are not randomly assigned to the arts or non-arts preschool, but where we do include rigorous controls for demographic variables to look at questions like, can the arts change daily trajectories of cortisol? And can the arts change cortisol across the year? So we finished the analyses for part 1 of the study and have some exciting results. It does seem that a single arts class relates to a reduction in cortisol, more so than participation in an early learning or homeroom class. And more arts is better. So if children have a visual arts, music, and dance class in a given day, they show lower cortisol levels than if they just had a single arts class or 2. So the research thus far leads me to conclude that the arts can serve as an important object of learning, but also as a mechanism. The arts can foster the development of emotion regulation and can get under the skin to influence physiological systems that respond to stress, with powerful implications for cognition, emotion, and physical health functioning. I think the arts may have an important role to play in addressing current challenges facing our society, particularly those related to poverty and racism. I think that including the arts can promote inclusivity, accessibility, equality, and emotional well-being for children from diverse backgrounds and with diverse needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Rather than click to the official NEA slide logo, let's leave these kids on there for you all. We have probably about 5 or 6 minutes. Maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions. Someone in the back, please. And again, if you'll just, I'll try to interpret your question, so at least I should hear it.
I think
It's just, sorry, repeating the question in case our videographer didn't pick it up. I probably will do a miserable job of it. But essentially, are you looking at, are you measuring right after the work of art is created? And your question is related to whether some of the relief or stress, or sorry, emotional regulation that occurs is because of validation from others. And to what extent is that built into this?
So I have just completed a study where we have the expression condition that I described, a distraction condition, and an expression with disclosure condition, where we have participants draw, and then to an experimenter, they describe what they had drawn and how that made them feel and what did they draw. And what we have found so far is that distraction is still better than both the expression and the expression with disclosure. It would be interesting, now we didn't have the experimenter interact with the subject, we just gave the subject the opportunity to express what they drew, and it would be interesting is it that feedback piece, having that extra piece, I think that would be the next step, is having a trained experimenter comment back, kind of validating their feelings. I think that's a great question, but so far our research is suggesting still distraction is better. Thank you.
Another question from the back? So if I'm understanding correctly, for Ellie, whether there was a correlation between the enjoyment of the art that was being created, is that correct? And maybe how that might play into their thought of themselves as an artist, so to speak? Did that seem to affect self-esteem?
Yeah, I can't say I have clear-cut results about that. I think one of my hypotheses is that the arts provide opportunities they provide more varied opportunities than traditional educational courses for experiencing success. So there might be children who would not experience success in the homeroom class that do experience success in music, and that those children might receive particular emotional benefits from that. But we did not compare children with different levels of artistic skill, and I think one of the nice things about the program that I've worked with is it allows children opportunities to hook in and experience success at whatever level they are at. And that's one of the reasons that I think we've seen advantages for children with developmental delays, is that they also are able to hook in and experience success.
I wanted to make sure the questions are distributed equally, so I have a question for you, Ellen, and you feel free to address if you wanted to address something that's been said. But I mean, you really threw down a challenge sort of from the beginning, about the way we think about one particular aspect of when we talk about outcomes related to the arts and interventions, and that is transfer of learning. Do you see these, now having seen both of these studies, and I know you're familiar already intimately with Jennifer Drake's, do you have any sense of how this, does this lead you to a different direction? Does it tell you, it's sort of a leading question, but does it speak to a different way of understanding arts, the sort of the unique, as you say, benefits of the arts than from understanding the arts related to a totally different domain?
Well, I mean, Jen's work, I think, is not a direct challenge to my claim that there was difficulty in demonstrating cognitive transfer. It's not a challenge at all, so I see those as totally compatible. Now, Eleanor's work actually is a challenge to what I said, and I think that first study that you reported where the Peabody went up was very startling, and that looked like a really excellent study, and I actually want to get it. But there you have arts integration, and you don't know yet why the Peabody went up. It may be that the kids are more motivated and more excited about learning. So it may not be like, it may still be mediated transfer rather than direct transfer. Whatever it is, it's really important and really exciting that we found that, and also really interesting that you found, I think the research on cortisol, a single art experience lowers cortisol, and Jen's research saying a single drawing improves mood. Those are totally consistent and really great to hear together.
Well, thanks for tying that together for me, Ellen. I think that we have to end, unfortunately, because of our time. Oh, there's one question. Go ahead. Sorry. So we may have to leave that for afterward, but it was a question, very interesting question about skills and assessment related to this work. So thank you very much. And I want to thank the folks from APA, of course, our speakers. Can we have another hand? As well as the speakers from the previous session, Ed and Beechin, and my colleague Bill O'Brien, who was indispensable partner in this, and also Ellen Grantham from our office who helped coordinate this. And thanks to the APA staff.